Guys who got told no during a failed marriage proposal, what happened afterwards? Not my story, but told from our jeweler when we were buying our wedding bands. So a guy comes in to buy an engagement ring. The jeweler sits down with him to talk about design, cost, and what have you. Our jeweler always asks people about how they are going to propose. She likes to share in the excitement. The guy brags about how he is going to propose to his GF at a ball game. On the big screen in front of the entire stadium while his favorite team plays. As the guy is speaking, our jeweler notices that everything is centered around the guy. From the ring, to the proposal. No mention of what his GF likes. Our jeweler gets a bad feeling, but she sells him the ring. Not long after, the guy comes back in with the ring. The GF said no, which really didn't surprise the jeweler. I had a foreign student at my university I'd only spoken to on the phone a few times, and whom I'd never met, call my father on Christmas morning of my freshman year. He asked my dad for my hand in marriage. They talked for ages, and my stupid father said yes. He was so out of touch with my life, he assumed the guy was my boyfriend. My dad thought I'd be thrilled, the idiot. This is a good one. I was fuming, but my grandmother and mother laughed so hard they nearly wet themselves, and that lightened me up. My grandmother said she hoped she could embroider my wedding sari. My dad remained clueless. My mom's boyfriend proposed to her 3 months into dating. She was 40, had one disastrous marriage and subsequent divorce under her belt by that time, and felt like it was too soon in the relationship to be talking marriage. He accepted her no, but said he wouldn't ask again, and he hasn't. They've been together 25 plus years now and never married. I mean, it worked out in the end, but holy shit, 3 months? Yeah, I honestly don't know what he was thinking. I can't tell you what happens when you propose and she isn't feeling it but says yes anyway because of social pressure. Very awkward, sad time until you finally have the talk you should have had before proposing. Ugh, facts. My ex proposed to me at Christmas in front of his entire family 2 hours away from home. I was 18. My ex did something similar. He pressured me into visiting with his family for Christmas in 2022. At that time, we had only been seeing each other for literally 2 months, so I told him I thought that it was a little too soon. He badgered and pressured me into it until I felt so bad that I felt like I couldn't say no. He told me that his mother had already bought Christmas gifts for me and how could I say no to his mother. Anyway, he proposed a couple of months later and I initially told him that again. I thought it was too soon. In fact, I tried to end the relationship. He again pressured me and talked to me down, and stupid me thought that we could work through it. I ended up leaving him about 6 months later. He became extremely controlling and verbally abusive. No surprise there given how he was acting in the beginning. I literally had to sneak away to get away from him. That was about a year ago. My 7th grade teacher brought his GF to school to propose to her in front of our entire class and she said no. It was the topic of discussion almost every day that year. NBS, he ended up moving schools at the end of the year. I used to date a guy who was in a band that had a bit of a cult following. They agreed to never let someone propose from stage again after an incident where a dude proposed on stage, and she said yes. But everyone could tell it was a no. He showed up at a show a few months later single. They said it was a big vibe killer for the show. Not me, but a proposal I saw. I was vacationing in Las Vegas back in 2006 with my then family. We took in a shower day on the trip. The day after Christmas we saw a magic show. About halfway through the performance, the magician had a young woman from the audience come up and assist with some trick. He did the meet and greet with her. She was on a vacation with her boyfriend's family and blah, blah. The magician does his thing and then suddenly the boyfriend appears out some box that deceptively empty just a second ago. The boyfriend goes down on his knee, out comes the ring, and he goes into his declarations of love and affection and rehash the last few years. It was a sweet proposal. She smiles and clasps her hands in front of her face and says, "Absolutely nothing." We in the audience are all silent and waiting to cheer and applaud, but waiting for her to say yes. It seemed like an eternity, but then the magician burst out with applause. He quickly guided the happy couple off the stage and announced she said yes, so we all cheered for the happy couple. What else was he going to do? They had great seats at a table, center stage and down in the front, where we could see the happy couple and family. The poor girl sat by herself and the dude huddled with his parents at the other side. I don't think they talked at all the rest of the show. This happened live on the Today Show many years ago during the segment where the anchor's hosts chit-chatted with people outside on the plaza. Guy proposed, girl said no. If I remember correctly, she said they had been dating only 2 weeks. It was extremely awkward for poor Al Roker. Not my own experience, but I was in the restaurant when a failed proposal happened. Somehow the guy was able to get the families involved in this fancy dinner without the girl's knowledge as to what was going to happen. He orders their drinks, where he had the ring cleaned and then placed at the bottom of her pina colada drink. She gets up and goes to the bathroom, and that's when some of her family moved in clothes with their cameras, phones ready for the proposal. She comes back and the drinks are brought. She refuses the drink, much to his dismay, but doesn't get the hint. She doesn't want it. You should have your drink, it's really good. She again says no. This goes on, back and forth. Finally she says no and is disturbed by his pushy behavior. I hear this from my table. I can't marry someone who won't respect my boundaries. She gets up and walks out of the restaurant. The guy sits there waiting for her to cool off. She doesn't come back in. So he fishes out the ring and has the drinks taken away. She comes back in near the end and he shows her the ring, tells her it was in the drink. And she slaps him and says no. This time she is angry and leaves. Everyone packs up and heads to pay. He just sits there by himself. I wanted to get up and say something, but my date was ready to go home. We'd been joking around about it for months. I'd ask sarcastically in the most unromantic way. She'd say no, we'd laugh and move on with our day. I'd apparently conditioned her so well that when I asked for real, she flippantly turned me down, and everyone around me either gasped or got this real awkward look on their face. She changed her tune sheet quick when she actually looked and saw me holding the ring. We've been married 17 years now. Good times. Sounds like you kind of set yourself up for that one. My wedding band has no engraved on the inside along with our wedding date. Probably one of my best memories tbh. HS sweethearts, off and on again through college and after. 9 years in total. Planned a trip and as we were leaving, she said, I hope you aren't going to ask me to marry you. Ring stayed in the bag and tried to enjoy the awkward trip. I was pretty devastated. She got married to someone about 6 months after that, I know. A few years later I met someone with whom I understood what a relationship should be. I traded in the original ring and have been married for 19 years now. Both she and my 2 kids are amazing, and I'm super thankful things worked out how they did. I got everything ready and she said no, at least not right now. And it sorta muted the rest of the weekend. Several people heard I was gonna ask and congratulated me the next week. It was surreal informing them she said no. It should have been a wake-up call to just end it there, but neither of us wanted to. We were our first everything and we had a lot of history. I guess I thought it would just work out, but our reservations on being married at that time never really went away. I admitted that both of us wanted exclusive things, our lives were headed towards opposite directions, and compromise just meant someone was going to be resentful. When we started dating, both of us really helped each other out in a lot of areas and through some really challenging times. But we learned, later on, that things that were great then may not be great now. Both of us were good people, but some things just have a lifespan. We got what we needed and it was time for the next phase of our lives, alone. A huge part of successful marriages requires compromise on small issues. But some issues have no compromise. It's okay to fight for things if there's a way that both of you can get what you want. And there's no shame in letting things go if there's nothing more than can be done. We broke up 7 or so months later. Restarting life, for what was the second time for me, was tough because I was also going through a lot of awkward things and she wasn't able to be there anymore. The same thing was happening on her end, so it just kinda ended there. We both dated other people and got married to others eventually. So in the super longer term, it was all okay. Was with a girl for a couple years. I started talking about getting married. She was up for it but kinda distant about it. I take her out ring shopping and she breaks down. Tells me she can't marry me. I was really confused. I thought things were going great. Turns out I was just the guy taking care of her until her ex gets out of prison. I paid for her schooling, helped her get off drugs. We were looking at houses. I thought we were making a life together. She left me not long after that. He got out of prison a few months later. She went back to stripping. I ran into them a few times. I guess she's happy. My friend proposed once and she said no. It was very early in their relationship. She said she only feels comfortable marrying him if he bought a house first. 10 years later he's afraid to ask her again, because she has a standard of how she wants to be proposed, with a fireworks show, a tropical beach area with all her friends watching, and a big diamond size ring like the videos she's seen on TikTok. But now all of her friends are getting married around her, so she now wants him to propose again. It's a weird waiting game for the both of them. I got proposed to in a full restaurant by hiding the ring in deserts. He even hired a photographer. I said yes due to pressure, and then when we got in the car, I said no because we were only dating for about 2 weeks. He did not take it lightly, and then he assaulted me. So yeah, never again saying yes due to pressure. My wife told me no twice before saying yes. The first time she said you're drunk, I was, point taken. The second time she replied I love you and like dating you but you're not emotionally mature enough to marry. Indeed. I cut back my drinking and worked on my emotional maturity, mental health. We've been married over 20 years now. Not a guy, but I set things up to be perfect. The two of us totally alone at sunset on a Sicilian beach, and he said no out of pure shock. He'd always expected that it would be him asking me, not the other way round. Then his brain kind of caught up with what was going on and he was horrified at himself for just saying no like that. He told me of course he wanted to marry me and he hadn't meant no as in he didn't want to marry me. It was more like no way did you just ask me that. But it came out wrong. We both agreed that this wasn't the proposal we'd both want to remember forever, so we do it again properly some other time. 9 months later he proposed to me on my birthday in one of my favorite spots. To his relief I didn't say no, and we've now been married 10 years. Not the guy here, but the naysayer. He had just finished a 1,000-mile solo cycling tour and I met him at the finish. I was so caught up in his achievement that I did not see the proposal coming and I was shocked. So I told him right there, I love you, but I can't give you an answer right now. Of course there were tears and we both called family members and then continued on our planned holiday. We had such a good time on our holidays and were able to enjoy each other's company like normal. So I figured that if we can handle this bump in the road this well, we are a great team, and at the end of the holiday I told him I would love to marry him. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't regretted my decision for a second. I simply needed time to process a life-changing choice and my partner was mature enough to understand this. I needed 2 additional tries to get her to say yes. One near the Eiffel Tower. It was never a hard no, more a not yet. We were both still students. She was unclear if she would stay there or go to the other side of the country or wherever. In 6 weeks we have our 10-year anniversary. My wife and I just celebrated 5 years married. I got offered to go to a computer conference in Paris 1 year. We had been together for like 4 years at that point, and had an apartment and dog together. I told her I'm going to Paris and she immediately asked if she could go. So we made a vacation out of it. First few days were the conference. Monday we did the Louvre, Tuesday was Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame, Wednesday was an off day for shopping, Thursday was Versailles, Friday Disney, Saturday fly back. Of course, my immediate thought was to propose at Eiffel Tower, just like in the cheesy romantic movies. My wife is an introvert and hates being the center of attention. It's a tourist trap. I thought better of it. So, Notre Dame? No, she's Christian. but it would also be packed. Disney? Cute, but crowded. Versailles, huge gardens with hedge mazes with secluded spots. Bingo. In the morning, we toured the palace, and then had lunch. She had a salad and a glass of wine. I had a French onion soup with 2 glasses of wine. Lol. After lunch we walked the gardens. We walked around a bit. I worked up the courage, and saw a spot with a bench. I'm a little tired, can we rest for a bit? Boom. Did the thing. Happily ever after. Thing was, she assumed I was going to do it at the Eiffel Tower. When we left Eiffel Tower and she didn't have a ring, she thought she wasn't going to be engaged on that trip. She told me after that she was kinda hissed at the time, which explains the second half of the day and Wednesday. She wasn't cold but not close. She later told me that my plan was the best thing ever. Perfect engagement. Not a guy but a girl. I asked my boyfriend to marry me. I didn't do a whole scene about it. We were talking and I said that I wanted to get married and I felt ready for it and he just said no. I was mad. He had never mentioned this and we've talked about it before. All he had ever said was that he didn't want it cause it was expensive and didn't want a big party, and so, in my understanding, we would get married at the courthouse and have a small gathering with family and close friends. Then I found out he didn't want to get married cause his parents had a divorce and he didn't want to go through that. It took a while to unravel all his issues with marriage. At a certain point I said I'm not gonna wait around with a guy that doesn't want to get married. I had always been very clear about wanting to get married. He disagreed and said I've also mentioned that I didn't want a big wedding. I'm like, what? We realized we were both talking about different things. He had put together marriage and the wedding and I wasn't. Still, obviously it wasn't solved right then and there. I gave him some time to think. After like a month I came back to the subject and he asked me why I wanted to get married and I talked about all the laws that protect the couple in the eventuality of disease and death, in owning property, in security if we had children, etc. He suddenly just said, oh, I didn't know about that. Then yeah, we'll get married. Then we've been happily married for 5 years. Almost every day he says he's so happy being married to me and that his wedding day was one of the happiest of his life. We continued dating. I asked her twice more. She said no. She just didn't want to get married, she said. After my mother passed away she said she realized what she should have accepted because nothing would change and then she proposed to me. I said no. Then laughed and said of course. My dad proposed to my mom 3 times. She laughed each time and took the ring, all 3 of them. They have been living miserably together ever since. I'm 31 now. They built a separate living room and avoid each other. My dad says he regrets it to this day. My dad is a wonderful man, and every time I asked why he stayed with that wretched woman he would say because she's your mother. He never goes into any more detail. If she says no, just move on. Not failed. My wife sniffed out my first attempt at a proposal so I postponed it for almost a year. When she lost all hope and was ready to give up I put my second proposal plan in motion. She worked a chocolate shop. It was the day before Easter so the place was packed. I sat at one end of the shopping plaza looking for a dude heading that way. The second guy I asked was game to help me out. The plan was to have him go into the shop and ask to have a box of chocolates made with a ring in the middle, after it needed to be delivered. My girlfriend wife actually helped put it together. At the same time I called the store informing a co-worker that my girlfriend needed to be the one to deliver it to the pottery shop next door. I walked into the shop and said I was surprising someone, could I sit in the corner for a few minutes? A few minutes later my girlfriend walks in wearing bunny ears, looking for a guy in a white shirt. When she saw me she was like, what are you doing here? Super confused. She went back to asking where the guy in the white shirt is. I stood up and stated the box is for you. Still confused she said no, it's the guy in the white shirt's box. I said no, open it, it's for you. It still didn't register completely. I walked over, grabbed the box and pulled out the ring and properly proposed. She said yes. It was funny, the pottery shop was a popular date place where you paint pottery and drink wine, so the place had about a dozen people. All the girls exploded when she said yes. All the dudes gave me the stink eye. When she walked back into her work, I guess everyone had stopped working when she left and was waiting at the door screaming and cheering as she walked in. I was totally fine with it, but I got left outside in the commotion. My job was over, lol. I said no because he was an addict. I was not, but I was young and dumb. He showed me by running out and marrying an Asian woman with 2 kids 6 months later. She used him for a green card and he adopted her kids, so now he has to pay her child support. I learned this because his mom came by my parents' home to catch up. My mom said it was beyond awkward. I broke up with this fool when I was 17 and she was trying to reconnect us. Bruh, I'm 34, happily married, and we have 4 kids. Kick rocks. We had been best friends for years and dating for a while after that, and I started asking her what she would think of marrying me. She always would say something like she would love it or that she can't think of anything better. I finally decided to talk to her mom about it and she said she approved. I asked her a few months later and she was pissed. She told me her mom told her I spoke with her about it and that I was an idiot for thinking she would want to get married after I had heard for a while about how ducked up her parents' marriage and divorce were. I was completely blindsided. I had prepared a romantic day together, ending at a really nice restaurant where I could privately propose to her. When I asked her why, she told me so many times that she wanted to get married. She thought it was part of some role playing or something. I still don't know what that means. Apparently I should have known she was absolutely against marriage just because her parents' marriage was shit. I am a woman, but I spent a year asking my boyfriend to marry me on a regular basis. I'd say wanna get married and he'd say yes, and I'd say can I tell my parents and he'd say no. A straight up year. Until finally we went on a little trip a couple hours from our apartment and he whipped out the letters he'd exchanged with my parents about wanting to propose. Just had our 6th anniversary. Found out she had been dating a friend I had helped her to meet. Later, he proposed to her in a restaurant where a buddy and I had gone to eat. Worst coincidence ever. I ended up hearing the restaurant clap and whoop for them. Fortunately, we were on the other side of the restaurant and that was the extent of it. Well, until they passed me on the highway when I was driving home. Second worst coincidence ever. It was like having someone step on your broken foot. Of course, they got married and then divorced because he had a wandering eye and followed up on it. As for me, I got married a lot later. My wife and I have been through plenty of medical issues together, but we've survived and are still happy together. But man, that prior experience was brutal. Not a marriage proposal, but a do you want to go out proposal. She and I were BFFs. We were always doing things together, having a great time. I figure why not take it to the next step and call each other boyfriend and girlfriend? BTW. She would have been the first black woman I dated. She said no. She explained, you're a great guy, and I have a lot of fun with you, but look, you're a white Jewish guy and I'm a black woman. It would never work out. I accepted that. We stayed friends, because I figure hanging out with her as friends was much better than not hanging out with her at all. A couple of weeks after I asked her, I got a call from her. Guess what? I got a boyfriend. Oh, that's nice. She then described him. He was a white Jewish guy. What happened afterwards was I moved across the country, not for her but because I got a great job offer. I hadn't heard from her since. When I was 21, I got involved with one of my college teachers who was significantly older than me. Somehow it kind of worked out and we were together almost 10 years. We had the whole house and dog thing worked out. But from about 5 years into it we started taking separate holidays because neither of us were particularly interested in what the other wanted to do. One day I had gone to his sister's place to pick him up from his most recent trip to Thailand. We lived in a regional city and his sister lived closest to the nearest international airport. So he calls me into the guest bedroom where he's been going through all his luggage and is surrounded by dirty holiday clothes and cheap trinkets. He pulls out a small glittery bag and hands it to me saying, "This is for you. It's an engagement ring. Will you marry me?" I was shocked and panicked and said okay. Then went out to the lounge room and called my best friend. She said it's okay to go back and say no. So I did. I went back in there and explained that I didn't want to get married. He just said okay and asked me not to tell anyone he'd asked. The next day at the beginning of the 4-hour drive home, he admitted that he accidentally got a happy ending the previous time he was in Thailand the year before. I was furious with him for essentially lying by omission for the whole previous year, especially when we had maybe had sex once in that whole period. I broke up with him then and there and then had the most awkward 4-hour drive to continue through. I got the last laugh though. I ended up finding and marrying a wonderful man who happens to be a massage therapist. So now I get all the happy endings and the irony is not lost on me. I work at a high-end hotel. In the last year, I've had 2 people call ahead and ask what we can do to facilitate a proposal. We send a bottle of Prosecco and handwritten notes to people celebrating anniversaries, birthdays, or other occasions. But what do you write on a note for a proposal? And we do it as a favor, so we don't promise anything ahead of time. All we do is send a list of things they can buy to place in the room ahead of time and recommend our spa services as well. Both times, you could tell that number 1, it was going to be a surprise, and number 2, they wanted help with it. Like the effort of a proposal should not come from other people than the one proposing, and as was already mentioned by others, never be a surprise. Both times, at checkout, you could tell it was a very obvious no. If you aren't sure, you aren't ready. I've asked my girl twice so far, and both times she has said no. The last time she said honey, why spoil everything? She didn't have a good first marriage, and I understand her reluctance. Lately, I have made it plain that I still want to do this, and she told me I don't want to say no, but I'm not ready to say yes, either. Her saying no is not a deal breaker, because I know her history and understand her. Patience will get us there when the time is right. An ex, who had been a strange combination of crack addict, stripper and accountant, proposed to me while we were on MDMA. I said that I'd like to answer the question when I wasn't high. I guess her trip went south and she dumped me 2 days later. Can't say I've any regrets as far as she is concerned. I did have a weird moment with another proposal. I had found the love of my life, but we'd only been together about 6 months when I proposed. She said yes, but afterwards her energy got all weird and she admitted it felt rushed. I felt really hurt, but said we could have a redo when she was ready. Luckily things worked out. We did marry and have had a solid marriage for the last 8 years. Proposed one date night only to learn she had been cheating on me while I was at work. Worked every Friday night. Had been going on for a while and never knew. OFC, all her friends knew and most of my friends knew. And after all that she made me the bad guy. Lost many friends I knew since grade school. I was distraught for months but eventually worked past it, mostly because my feelings were invalidated. As if I really loved her, it wasn't a big deal. She wasn't ready even though she couldn't give me any reasons. Was together for 3 years, stayed for another 3, most of which were long distance because of graduate school. I worked and made inroads with a lab at the same school she went to and was planning on transferring next semester, when she started emotionally cheating on me with a guy friend that she knew had feelings for her. We had conversed before that point and I told her I trusted her to navigate that friendship in a way that respects our relationship, and she said she would. She then said it was poly or break up, so we tried poly for a few months and she ended up breaking up with me when it was clear it wasn't working for any of us. Now I'm married to my beautiful and trustworthy wife. Celebrating our 1-year anniversary, together for 5, and I don't wake up to anxiety nightmares nightly, although it took a good 3 years at least to get there. Dated for 3 years. He was, I thought, the love of my life. I locked eyes with him and as I was about to open my mouth and say will you marry me, he said we need to break up. He met someone else. They have been married for 2 years and it turns out I'm into women. We do not speak but I wish him the best. I was with my college boyfriend for 7 years. Everyone thought we would get married eventually. There were a few big life milestones where I thought he would propose, but instead he would ask for space and we'd take a break. During one of those breaks, I met my now husband and never looked back.